My name is Jessica. I'm 29 years old and I need to tell you about the 13th floor in my apartment building. The floor that doesn't exist on any blueprint, any directory, any official record. The floor where dead people live normal lives without knowing they're dead. Last month, I moved into Celestial Heights, a brand new luxury apartment complex downtown. 30 floors of modern living with all the amenities you could want. Like most buildings, it skipped the 13th floor due to superstition. The elevator buttons went from 12 straight to 14. I live on the 15th floor, apartment 1507. Beautiful view of the city, floor-to-ceiling windows, everything I'd dreamed of after years of saving up. The building was so new that I was one of the first tenants to move in. Most apartments were still empty, which I loved. No noisy neighbors, no crowded elevators. I should have wondered why such a beautiful modern building had such cheap rent. I should have asked why the previous tenant had moved out after only 3 weeks. But I was so excited to finally afford luxury living that I didn't ask questions. The first time the elevator stopped on the 13th floor, I thought it was a malfunction. It happened on my 4th day in the building. I was coming home from work around 6 p.m., pressed the button for the 15th floor like always. The elevator rose smoothly past floors 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 12. Then instead of continuing to 14, it stopped. The doors opened and the display showed 13 in red digital numbers. I stared at it, confused. There was no 13th floor button in the elevator, no 13th floor on the building directory. But here I was, looking out at a hallway that was identical to my own floor. Same beige carpet, same cream-colored walls, same lighting fixtures. Even the apartment numbers were the same: 1301, 1302, 1303, going down the hall just like on my floor. But something felt off. The air was cooler and there was a strange smell like flowers that had been left in water too long. I pressed the closed door button frantically, but nothing happened. The elevator seemed to be waiting for me to get out. After about 30 seconds, the doors finally closed on their own, and the elevator continued up to my floor. I convinced myself it was a glitch in the building's system. New construction, new elevators, probably just some programming error that would be fixed soon. But that night I couldn't stop thinking about that hallway. It had looked so real, so normal, except for that underlying feeling of wrongness. The next morning I mentioned it to the building manager, Mr. Rodriguez. His face went pale when I described what happened. "Miss Chen," he said carefully, "there is no 13th floor in this building. The elevator cannot stop there because it doesn't exist." "But I saw it," I insisted. "The doors opened, there was a hallway, apartment numbers." He shook his head firmly. "Impossible. The building goes from the 12th floor directly to the 14th. There is no 13th floor." Mr. Rodriguez was lying and I knew it. Over the next few weeks, the elevator continued to stop on the 13th floor, but only sometimes. Never when other people were with me, never during peak hours. Always when I was alone, always when the building was quiet. Each time I would see the same hallway, but I started noticing details that I'd missed before. The apartment doors were the same style as the rest of the building, but they looked older somehow. The numbers were slightly faded. And sometimes I could hear sounds coming from behind the doors: television shows, conversations, normal apartment life. The strangest part was that I began to recognize the voices. Mrs. Patterson from 1503, who had supposedly moved out suddenly 2 weeks before I arrived. Mr. Kim from 1208, who the other tenants said had disappeared without notice. These were people who had lived in the building but were no longer supposed to be here. I started researching the building's history. Celestial Heights had been built on the site of an older apartment complex that had been demolished 3 years ago. But construction had been delayed multiple times due to incidents, workers reporting strange accidents, unexplained equipment failures, and several construction-related deaths. The most disturbing discovery was that the original building had burned down in 1987, killing 13 residents who were trapped on the upper floors. The new building had been constructed as a memorial of sorts, which explained the luxury amenities at affordable prices. But I still didn't understand the connection until I started keeping track of when the elevator stopped on the 13th floor. It wasn't random. It happened every time I came home between 6 and 7 p.m., the same time most people would be returning from work. The same time the original building had caught fire. After 3 weeks of seeing the 13th floor, I finally worked up the courage to step out of the elevator when the doors opened. I had to know what was really happening, even if it meant confronting something supernatural. The hallway was exactly as I'd seen it from the elevator, but walking through it felt like moving through thick air. Every step required effort, like I was pushing through water. The sounds from the apartments were clearer now. I could hear Mrs. Patterson watching her evening news, Mr. Kim cooking dinner, normal domestic life. I approached apartment 1307 and knocked gently. The door opened immediately as if someone had been expecting me. Standing there was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a warm smile. She was wearing a floral dress that looked like it was from the 1980s. "Oh, hello dear," she said brightly. "I'm Helen Morrison. I live in 1307. I've been meaning to introduce myself." She spoke as if this was completely normal, as if she was just another neighbor welcoming me to the building. Yes, I'm Jessica," I managed to say. "I live on the 15th floor." Helen's smile never wavered. "How wonderful. So nice to have young people in the building. Would you like to come in for coffee?" I was just about to start dinner. Against my better judgment, I followed her into the apartment. It was decorated exactly like an apartment from the 1980s, heavy furniture, floral wallpaper, old appliances that looked brand new. But what struck me most was how normal everything felt. Helen moved around her kitchen with ease, chatting about the weather and asking about my job. "How long have you lived here, Helen?" I asked carefully. She paused, a puzzled expression crossing her face. "Oh, let me think. It feels like no time at all, really. The days just blend together. But I love it here. Such a nice, quiet building. Great neighbors, good management. I can't imagine ever wanting to leave." I spent an hour with Helen, and the whole time she acted completely normal except for one thing: she couldn't remember specific dates. When I asked her about current events, she would mention things from decades ago as if they had happened yesterday. When I asked about her family, she would talk about calling her sister, tomorrow, to make weekend plans. As I was leaving, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On Helen's kitchen counter was a newspaper dated September 15, 1987. The headline read, "Apartment Fire Claims 13 Lives." There was a photo of a burning building that looked exactly like where we were standing and a list of victims. Helen Morrison, age 43, apartment 1307, was the first name on the list. I backed toward the door, my heart pounding. "Helen," I said softly, "what year do you think it is?" She laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. "What a funny question, dear. It's 1987, of course. September 15th. I remember because I was supposed to have dinner with my sister tonight, but she's running late." I ran from the apartment and back to the elevator, pressing the button frantically. When the doors opened, I could see Helen standing in her doorway, still smiling and waving goodbye as if nothing had happened. Over the next few days, I met more residents of the 13th floor. Mr. Kim, who died in the fire while trying to save his cat. Mrs. Patterson, who had actually died of a heart attack in the new building just weeks before I moved in. A teenage boy named Danny who had fallen down the stairs during construction. They were all living normal lives, going through the motions of their daily routines, completely unaware that they were dead. They couldn't see each other. Each person acted as if they were the only one living on the floor. And most disturbing of all, they all thought it was the day they died. I confronted Mr. Rodriguez with what I'd discovered, and he finally admitted the truth. The building wasn't just constructed on the site of the old apartments. It was built specifically to contain the spirits of those who had died there. The developers knew about the supernatural activity but had found a way to profit from it. "The 13th floor exists in a kind of limbo," he explained reluctantly. "The people who die here or who died on this site, they get trapped there. They can't move on because they don't realize they're dead. As long as they stay on that floor, they don't bother the living residents." "But why does the elevator sometimes stop there?" I demanded. He looked uncomfortable. "It only stops for certain people. People who are sensitive to these things. People who might be able to help them move on. But we discourage interaction. It's better for everyone if the dead stay where they are." "That's horrible," I said. "These people are trapped, living the same day over and over. They deserve to find peace." Mr. Rodriguez shook his head. "You don't understand. If they realize they're dead, if they become aware of their situation, they might become angry. Violent. It's happened before in other buildings. The peaceful dead become vengeful spirits. But I couldn't leave those people trapped in their endless loops. Helen had been so kind to me, had welcomed me like a real neighbor. Danny was just a teenager who never got to grow up. They deserved better than this eternal limbo. I decided to try to help them understand their situation, to help them find peace and move on to whatever comes next. The next time the elevator stopped on the 13th floor, I went to Helen's apartment with a plan. I brought newspapers from 2024, my smartphone with current news, anything that might help her understand how much time had passed. But the moment I showed her the newspapers, her expression changed. The kind, warm woman I'd met disappeared, replaced by something cold and angry. "You're lying," she said, her voice distorting. "You're trying to trick me. It's 1987. It's always been 1987. The apartment around us began to change. The wallpaper started peeling, the furniture began to rot, and the smell of smoke filled the air. Helen's face became gaunt, her eyes hollow. "You want to take me away from my home," she said, her voice now a whisper that sounded like crackling flames. "But I like it here. We all like it here." Suddenly, all the doors in the hallway opened at once. The other residents stepped out, but they weren't the friendly people I'd met before. They were angry, their faces twisted with rage and confusion. They had realized they were dead and it had driven them mad. "You did this to us," Danny screamed, his teenage voice breaking. "We were happy. We were peaceful. Why did you have to ruin everything?" They all started moving toward me, their movements jerky and unnatural, like marionettes being controlled by an angry puppeteer. I ran for the elevator, but the doors wouldn't close. The spirits surrounded me, reaching out with hands that felt like ice. "Stay with us," Helen pleaded, her voice now desperate. "If you stay, you can help us remember. Help us feel alive again." I pressed every button on the elevator panel and finally, mercifully, the doors closed. But as the elevator rose to my floor, I could hear them screaming, pounding on the doors, begging me to come back. That night, I packed everything I owned and left Celestial Heights. I couldn't stay in a building where dead people were trapped in eternal suffering, especially knowing that I had made their suffering worse by making them aware of their situation. I tried reporting it to the authorities, but no one believed me. The building management denied everything, and there were no official records of a 13th floor. To everyone else, I was just another tenant who couldn't handle city living. 6 months later, I heard that the building had been evacuated due to electrical problems. Residents reported elevators stopping at floors that didn't exist, voices in the walls, and temperatures dropping without explanation. The building was sold to a new company that promised to renovate the infrastructure. But I know the truth. The spirits of the 13th floor are no longer content to live their peaceful delusions. They're angry, they're aware, and they want revenge on the living world that forgot about them. I've moved 3 states away, but sometimes I still have nightmares about that elevator, about those hollow eyes and desperate voices. I learned that some people are better off not knowing the truth about their situation. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. If you ever move into a building with cheap rent and no 13th floor, pay attention to the elevators. If they start stopping at floors that shouldn't exist, don't get out. Don't try to help. Some people are trapped for good reason. And if you're ever in an elevator and the doors open on a floor that looks familiar but feels wrong, remember Helen's words. We all like it here. Sometimes the dead don't want to be saved.